Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another session of Canvas Live. Canvas Live sessions are presented by Canvas community members, Instructure employees, and or Canvas partners to help Canvas users improve and enhance their teaching and learning with Canvas. Today is a special day. We have a partner keynote, and we're going to start our partner day with Jesse Polis. He's with us from Instructure. And he's going to talk about integrations and building safe and secure LTI API integrations with Canvas. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jesse to take it away.
Hello, everybody. I am Instructure's Partner Integration Specialist. And with Instructure, I do daily consultations with our partners and prospective partners. Just sort of talking to them about how they can integrate successfully with Canvas by leveraging LTI and API. And so I've learned a lot of things throughout my year and a half in this position, and I thought it'd be a good idea to share some of those insights with people. A lot of what this presentation is about comes directly from common questions that I have from potential partners and clients themselves. So mostly today, we'll be talking about developer key management, and a lot of this came from a blog post that I did called Administrative Guidelines for Issuing Developer Keys. There's a lot of ambiguity in terms of when you should or should not issue a developer key. So we'll go into a lot of that in detail in this presentation. So to start off, I thought it'd be a good idea to talk about just LTI-only integrations, because developer keys basically are just a route for a partner or a vendor of any kind. They don't have to be a partner to integrate with Canvas API. We can go into some more detail on that later, but basically right now I want to talk about LTI-only integrations. They have a lot of great features in them, but sometimes they become limited. So they're completely capable of doing single sign-on through an LTI launch. They can show their external app within Canvas in an iframe. Many of you have probably already seen this. You can also pass back grade information for LTI assignments. And you can also embed content into, say, the rich content editor, or even into it as a module item, or pick a specific assignment for our students to take. And that's done through a specification within the IMS Global group, who we work with to develop these specifications and standards with other LMSs and with LTI providers. That basically allows people to get content into the LMS. But when it comes to, there are limitations, and a lot of those relate to massively creating, updating, and deleting content, and say pulling an account-wide list of courses, or syncing for a specific user after an LTI launch happens. Maybe they want to know more context about that user, about maybe all of the courses that they're in. So those are some of the areas that can't be done with LTI, but they can be done with API. So a deeper integration requires API access, and that happens through developer keys. That's where the developer key comes into play, is allowing these integrations to become a little bit deeper. So developer keys, they basically just permit that deeper integration to happen. They're part of what, more technically speaking, is called an OAuth 2 flow. And the end result is a sharing of an API token between Canvas and that tool, so that they can essentially access a user's API with their developer key. They can actually ask for authorization. They don't get immediate access, but that just allows them to ask for access. So a very high-level overview of what happens here is a user launches a tool. The tool uses that developer key to initiate an OAuth 2 flow, and we'll go into that in more detail later. And a lot of you may have seen this as up in there in the top right, there's an authorization screen that asks that whether this app is allowed to access your information for API. And what happens is down below at the bottom of the screen, you can see if you go into the user settings, you'll see now there's a listing for that app it says when that token expires, and then the user could actually delete that if they want to revoke access to their information if they wanted to. And that, just going back here, that token again is shared with the tool as well, so that they can store that in their database. So we've mentioned some of this before, but why do tools need developer key access? It allows them to access API for specific users as if they were that user. It's more secure than manually sending a token over. So think about if a vendor needs, say, admin level access, they may ask for an admin account. And a lot of schools, or a lot of institutions will go in and they'll manually create a user and scope down the permissions for that user, and then they'll issue they'll issue an API token. And the problem is that that API token never expires. So if anybody ever gets a hold of it, they'll have access to everything as well. And also, there's no real secure way of sharing that token with the tool outside of email. I mean, there's some services like a website called One Time Secret where you can send like a one-time use link, and that's the best way to send tokens is something like that. But a developer key has the advantage of, even if they get the developer key, they need to know the redirect URI, and they also need to know which domain that developer key belongs to, and they need a lot more information. And even then, the user still has to actually click on something to authorize the application. It's much more visible that something's going on. And furthermore, more importantly, this third point, they can be deactivated by an admin or someone at Instructure if they're compromised, if you know that something has been leaked insecurely, if they're abused, such as maybe this vendor is using student emails to market to them, and that's not in their terms of service. Something outside of the terms of service, or the vendor contract may have expired or was canceled. That may allow your institution to revoke access to that tool without having to go in and find all the different tokens that may have been shared with that tool. So how does a tool get a developer key? I get this question a lot from tool providers. I always say during development, you can either install Canvas locally via the GitHub repo, which is in the resources section in this presentation here. It's I think toward the left. And then they could also partners with Instructure. If someone does end up partnering with us, they also get an Instructure hosted instance of Canvas so that they don't have to deal with installing locally. And then that essentially gives them the same level of access as that we would have here at Instructure to that account. So they can issue developer keys themselves at that point. Post-deployment, after the application's actually been developed, they have to be requested on an per institution basis by an account admin. And the reason for this is that we had a lot of feedback from admins saying that they wanted to know which applications were able to access their users' information. So we've sort of switched to this model of the tool needs to sort of build that relationship with each institution one by one. And so that kind of leads into this. As an admin, how do you know when to issue a developer key? And a lot of that's going to depend on your institution's internal security and privacy policies. That's where that blog post focuses on, is that administrative guidelines for issuing developer keys. That's also in the resources section here. And basically, I can give you a hint. A lot of it is, you probably want a statement on how the tool complies to FERPA and COPPA. What are its security practices surrounding how they store developer keys? What API endpoints do they use? I've even seen contracts written up where if the tool uses any API that's outside of the scope of what they describe in their documentation, that could be a reason for violating their contract, and you could, say, terminate the contract with them if you wanted to. So again, there's a lot of comments in there as well, a lot of good discussion going on there about that topic. So I encourage you to check that out. I'm not going to dive deeper into this on this presentation. So what are the security risks of issuing a developer key? Transfer of the developer key storage and exposure in a user interface are the main things that I would be concerned about. When you transfer the developer key, my recommendation for tools, I think I actually go into this later, so I'm going to not talk too much more about those points. It's basically, you just want to keep the developer key in the hands of the people who should be able to see it. So make sure that everybody who's able to see it is supposed to see it. So this is where this kind of dives into deeper on that previous slide. As a tool provider, how do I obtain and store developer keys? I think ideally using a secure web form for your potential clients to submit the developer key directly to your database through a web app is the ideal circumstance. And I even take that to the next level. A lot of tools will require a key in secret that's outside of this developer key that is used to sign the LTI launch. And before you even generate that key in secret, you could even try having the form require that they put in a developer key before you even generate their LTI1 key in secret. And secondary to that, if you can't figure out a web form way, it'd be good to have at least a single-use expiring URL that's sent via email to the client so that they can just click on it. They can get that information over to you in some secure way. And then that link would expire. So some way for them to either email that link to you. So again, that onetimesecret.com is just one of many sites that do something like that. And then storage, always store that developer key securely and along with the tokens that are generated from it. Don't put it in a Google Sheet. Things like that are just not good practice. And just never expose it in the UI. I've seen a vendor before that had an error report that showed that it showed in the error report the developer key and secret in there, and even the API token that was being used. So we had to have a stern talk with them, and they quickly turned around and made some changes. And then never commit to a GitHub repository that information either. So I'm going to take a more technical level of look here. So as a tool provider, what are the best practices for implementing this OAuth 2 flow that uses developer keys? So I'm just going to walk through here on the top left. The user launches an LTI tool, and then the tool should consume that information from the LTI launch. There's a lot of different user IDs that could be used. My recommendation is to use the one that's just called user_ID. That will be unique to Canvas and globally unique across all different accounts in Canvas. So any AWS hosted account, it will be unique across that area. And it can't be edited or changed. It'll always be the same. So I've seen some vendors use email and they run into problems because then all of a sudden the student goes in and changes their primary email. And then now the student launches the tool and they think either this person, we're not going to let them in because we don't know who they are, or they create a secondary account for them that has to be merged later. So they look the user up, and then you want to have, I've put like sort of an example here to the right of that bubble that says tool looks up user in the database that shows an example of what kind of information you want to store with that user in the user database. So the API token, the refresh token, you'll want to calculate the expires at. It's always going to be whatever the time of the launch is plus 1 hour. We actually tell in the response for the OAuth 2 flow, we'll tell you how long that token takes to expire. And then I also like to use that last column, some sort of custom API domain, or even better would be if you use that secure web form to issue a consumer key in secret of your own that's used for signing. I would say use that instead, because sometimes Canvas customers will have multiple domains. So for example, I may have jpoulos at instructure.com, but I could also have canvas.jpoulos.edu or something where people set up these secondary domains. And in that case, you could either use that consumer key, or you could have a secondary column that allows to look up either one. So moving down that chain on the left, the first check I would do as an application is just make sure, does the user already have an API token? If they don't, we'll go through that flow. So toward the right, you're going to want to look up what developer key belongs to that domain that they launched from, and that's where that storage comes into play. And the consumer key could be another approach. So you've generated this consumer key for them for the LTI launch. You can associate that with the developer key that they've provided to you, and then identify which key that is relevant for them. And then once you've identified the developer key, you can then go ahead and do the full OAuth 2 flow. And I'm not going to go into details on that because the documentation is pretty good. That's another in the resource. You can actually just go to api.instructure.com as well, and there's an OAuth 2 section that you can review for the entire process. And the output of that flow is that Canvas will provide an API token, a refresh token, and an expiration time. And or it doesn't even provide the expiration time. It just says it expires in 1 hour. And so you'll just add that to the current time and store that. And one thing to note here is that the API token, while it expires, the refresh token will always remain the same. So it can continually be reused, and we'll see that later in this flow. So go back now. After that, you can then basically, you've got all their information, and you can show them your initial LTI view that you want to show them that experience that you want them to have. So if going back to where it says if a user has an API token, if they do, you want to make sure that it's not expired. So let's say that it is expired. So going right again, look up the refresh token and the developer key. So you're just going to want to look up that token in the database based on that user's ID, and then go through the refresh OAuth 2 flow, which again is in the API docs. And again, you'll store that new API token, and the refresh token won't change. So that just remains the same for that user. And then after that, you have your new token, and you can show that LTI view to the user. Now, if the token is expired, or if the token's not expired, you just want to check that it works. And I do this usually by just hitting like the user's profile or something and checking to make sure you get a 200 response back. And if it doesn't work, then they've probably deleted the token, and you're going to want to take them back up through that entire full OAuth 2 flow again, so that you can recognize them there. And if the token does work, then you can go ahead and show them the LTI. And I'm seeing a question come in here from Victor, and he's asking, can you explain what an OAuth token is? So an OAuth token is not, hopefully I didn't say that. So there's an API token that you use OAuth 2 to obtain. So OAuth 2 is associated with that developer key. And in order to do OAuth 2, that OAuth 2 flow, you need a developer key. And the output of that is an API token. So hopefully that helps explain that question. And I just thought now would be a good time to sort of talk about some of this is just a mock-up here of some of the changes that we hope to make, because we get a lot of concerns from admins saying that we don't want to give a tool access to the full set of, say, some admin's API. So that's why they'll go through that custom permissioning where they create a custom admin role and then issue a token and send it over. So this is sort of an attempt to do a couple things. One, in the bottom left here, you can see there's a privacy policy URL and a terms of service URL. And that allows a little bit more transparency in this process, so that it sort of makes that vendor think about this a little bit more. So that can be entered, and then this can also be set up at the site admin level here at Instructure, so that you could actually have, we could say, here's a list of 100 apps that we've got developer keys for. You can choose to enable them. Here's their terms of service privacy URL. And you wouldn't even have to issue a developer key to them. They would just use that global one. But then you could deactivate it if you want. And you can actually, in the right here, you can see where you could actually scope down the permission set that that they get access to. So the token that's issued would only be able to do, in this example, an update to accounts. They could delete users from accounts, or they could, say, create a sub-account. And you could even do, like up in the top right, you could set a read-only type access so that they can only do the GET request type situation on all API endpoints. So the attempt here is to build enough structure in here to go back to being able to issue global developer keys without admins losing control over who has access to their account. So they would still be able to go in and actually deactivate these global level keys and not use them if they chose to. And then it would also sort of streamline the installation process so that say Pearson, for example, has a global key. Well, now you can just go in, and the installation process, rather than generating a developer key and sending it to them, would just be to turn that on, and then you're ready to go. And those are the major features. And again, this is not a final design. A lot of this is based on feedback from the community. And this is just a mock-up. We haven't started any work on this. And that's sort of what our hope is here, is to, and you could also issue these at the account level instead of site admin level. So if we, say, didn't have a listing for somebody, you could create one yourself as well. Let's see. So I think right now that's the end here. So we can do some chat Q&A, and I can start going through this chat lines here and start answering some questions. So I'm going to talk about Kevin's question here, Kevin Nolan from Colorado State, and he's asking whether we can create an account with limited permissions and then issue a developer key with that limited account. Any concerns with that strategy? I'm not sure I follow the question, maybe I didn't explain it right, but essentially we would have some developer keys set up at the global level. You could add your own, and the tokens that are issued from that developer key would have scoped down permissions based on what you have set up in that UI. And even a global level key you could customize for your own account. So if you wanted to kind of clarify a little more on that, Kevin, I can come back to that. And so we have one saying, instead of granular API scope, stakeholders at our institution are more concerned about account-wide scope, sub-account scoping with developer keys. We'd have to consult, that's a good question. I'd have to consult the designs to see if sub-account level developer keys are being considered. But I think, if I recall correctly, we are considering sub-account level developer keys, partly because we'll get sometimes students that are in computer science will want to develop an app, and the institution doesn't want them to, say, access anything outside of some student sub-account of some kind. And we're getting one here from Coastline that says, have there been any third-party tools that you've had security problems with? Is there a vetting process to be an LTI in Edu App Center? We take security problems very seriously, and like I mentioned, there was that one case, it's very, very rare, where we had a tool that was exposing some of those developer keys and things like that in the UI. And I believe there was another case what sort of instigated our move from issuing global developer keys to account level developer keys, where we had a vendor that was using student emails to do marketing campaigns, and that wasn't in their terms of service. And so we thought, let's let institutions sort of figure that part out, that vetting process that you're inquiring on. When a listing goes into Edu App Center, we verify that the app launches and it works from a technical level. But in terms of installation, there isn't a vetting process. We expect institutions to vet those tools themselves. And Edu App Center has a way to whitelist apps so that you only can show in your account apps that are approved by your team. In terms of granular permissions becoming available in the regular permission set, I think there's a separate project that might be addressing that. I don't know a lot about it, but I have heard rumblings that we would make a more granular permissions set at some point. I don't have much information past that, though. So is asking for terms of service a standard practice? We don't ask for terms of service, but we would expect that if there are terms of service, that would be readily available if inquired upon by an institution. I'm going to answer Kevin's question here. So it says most peer universities I work with are extremely reluctant to issue a developer key. Are we paranoid, or can a developer key be used to exploit our system and users? Could be used to exploit your system or users, and that's why you should have a very good trusting relationship with any tools that you've issued developer keys with. You probably don't want to issue a developer key to somebody that you don't have a good relationship with, for example, or you don't have a written contract with, or that doesn't have a FERPA policy or a security policy. And if you ever have doubts about how that developer key is being used, you can contact support and ask for an audit of that developer key. There are ways that we can actually pull in our logs to see how those developer keys are being used. It's not extremely difficult to do. And if you do inquire and are running into problems with support, feel free to contact, have it escalated. Feel free to contact me or your CSM, for example, and make sure that you get the answers that you need on how that developer key is being used. It's absolutely available. We have logs out for the past. You want to do it fairly quickly. We have our logs go back 20 days, and then to get further back, you'd have to get a deeper level of understanding there. We'd have to do a little bit of a deeper log dive. And there's a couple minutes left, so I'll keep going. Are there any solid libraries that implement the OAuth2 flow that you described? Yes, there are. And unfortunately, I didn't put them in the resources, but there are PHP gems. I think IMS Global has some, no, I'm thinking other auth. For OAuth2, yes, there's the IMS LTI gem, which we have developed. And then I think Atomic Jolt is one that comes to mind. They've got one set up as well that does OAuth2. I have a sample app that is out there as well. And maybe, I don't know the best way to get it out there, but it's on GitHub. If you look up LTI or die, you should be able to find my app up there on GitHub. Yes, paranoia can be healthy. I agree. Let's see here real quick. We got one from Auburn. If your school is wanting to develop your own tools, any suggestions on where we can start? Any tips on what language we should use? I would start, honestly, with just a single sign-on type application. So get that OAuth 1.0 flow, which is the key and secret signing that stuff down. There's a lot of resources online. You can also go to instructure.github.io, and there is a mailing list there, and there is an IRC channel, and there's also a developers group in the community that you can use to talk to people about that kind of thing. And then if things become extremely complicated, we do also have a professional services team that can help do consultations as well. Last one here, I think I have time to answer is, says, as an admin, how clear do I need to be on this process? Will companies offer instructions to Canvas admins on integration from my perspective, what I need to worry about or be careful about is to issue a developer key. We should be very careful about that, as Kevin is saying, just not do it, correct? So I wouldn't say don't do it. That work with your security team and sort of develop that process. Consult your other institutions in the area or in the community and talk about what other people are doing. I think it's absolutely okay for people to draw the line on what people should be able to do and who has access to their users' information. So hopefully, you know, this token scoping project takes some of that anxiety out of some of those things and makes things a lot more transparent. But the main thing that for me would, if I was an admin, would make me feel more comfortable is just knowing which API endpoints that tool says that they're supposed to be using, and that, you know, and you just, for now, unfortunately, you kind of have to trust them on that and have a good relationship. So, but you can always revoke that developer key if you find abuse, like I said earlier. So thanks, guys, for joining me on this session, and looking forward to seeing more feedback in the community on my blog post. And at some point, I may do some more blog posts, so keep your eyes out there.
Thank you so much, Jesse. That was awesome. Thank you, everybody else, for attending this session. We encourage you, like Jesse was saying, to get involved in the community. You can always go to live.canvaslms.com to be notified of upcoming partner events and upcoming Canvas Live sessions. And we also encourage you to join the Canvas Live user group to collaborate on other presentations and present to the community as well, just like Jesse did, and just like other community members also do. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day of partnership webinars, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you very much, everybody.